Okay, welcome to this third video in the streams for my Intro to Audio Production class at the University of Colorado, Denver. This is a stream where we're going to be talking about mastering. We talked about some songwriting and some mixing. We're kind of jumping on some different topics, not exactly chronological, but certainly this one comes after the other ones that we've talked about. And hopefully we'll have some of my students on the stream right now, but they'll be watching it later. And throughout this video, there are going to be some questions that they're going to answer in this week's homework. And so stay tuned for those 3 questions throughout the video. It's a teacher technique not to tell you exactly where they are, so you can just skip ahead to them, but instead I'm hoping you'll watch this and find some value in it. But for anyone who's watching this who's not in my class, welcome, and hope you enjoy this look at some mastering topics. We're going to look at a few different tools and talk about overall issues with mastering. We'll do a little bit of the evolution of mastering, just because I think that there's the way that history works, it helps informs what we do next, but also in the case of something like vinyl, which has over the last few years had a fairly large resurgence, then I think that it's worth looking at how some of that mastering process is taking place still, because a physical master process with a disc is different than a digital mastering process with something like a streaming service. And I would say, in general, Logic as a tool, that's the one that's on the screen right now, and the one I have access to today, is not a terrific mastering platform. Although it's one I've used for mastering in many different years in the past 15 years or 20 years or so. I've certainly used it for that, but we've always had to maybe send some of the information out to other places. And so I think that we have to put everything in context. So today we will be talking a little bit about some of the mastering tools we have in Logic, but also maybe looking at some third-party things that I use as well, because I think all of it's valuable and can certainly inform how we do the final things with our music. First and foremost, the thing that you should be friends with is the internet. I know that sounds kind of silly, but let me show you just an example of something. Mastering levels for streaming services. Now, you're going to see different things that pop up, and over time, some of these things could be changing. I mean, these companies, such as Spotify or Apple Music, are allowed to update their specs, right? They can change things around. But you're going to see that there's a range of different things just popping up from Google. This is from mastering.com, a blog. It's the result. I didn't choose this one necessarily. But it's talking about this thing called LUFS, or Loudness Unit Full Scale Integrated. And it's -14 for Spotify, -16 for Apple Music, -14 for YouTube, -14 for Tidal, -14 for Amazon, -15 for Deezer. Cool. And let's just pop over to this article for a second. You could read through and do this and you figure some of this stuff out. But I'm going to show a little bit of what these tools actually mean a little bit and talk about them. But there is a caveat that I will say for this particular presentation. One of them is if I'm doing a professional project or working on a professional project, we're going to send it to an engineer whose sole focus is mastering. Because as good as someone who is like me, who's more about the production, the creation, the creativity of the musical creation, and even somewhat mixing, but sequencing and other MIDI and synthesis type things. That's really, if someone needs an expert, I would feel comfortable saying, come to me. It's like, I've written books. I've done this for decades. I understand all of those things. Mastering, yes, I know what it is. I know how to do it. I've done it. I think some of my mixes that are out there on streaming services sound great, just as we intended them to. But still, there's like a certain art form and technical requirements that come with this. And so you want somebody who's an expert at it. And so I still recommend, for anything that's a professionally released project with a budget, to use an actual dedicated person who is a mastering engineer. And so an article like this will tell you, sure, some things about where we're looking at and how to make things sound good. But just know, and this is the first thing I'll say, is that if you're close, most of these platforms will finish the job in terms of the right loudness. And if you're close, it's a lot better than being far away, because the things that they'll do if you're far away can be pretty destructive to your music. But if you're close, then it typically will just finish it and not ruin it, if that makes sense. And so the things we're going to be talking about just briefly are, and I think it's always good when you see like a blog you've never read that says almost the same exact thing, but we're talking about how loud things are with the levels. And then there's this thing called true peak level. And that's the absolute loudest your song gets. And we'll talk both about those things in just a minute. Ooh, so awesome. So for my students, question number 1 for your assignment this week is, in terms of hiring an expert to help on your project, and this is more of like a response than a question, but why might it be important to actually hire a mastering engineer to be the last one to work on your project before it's released? We'll just stick with streaming, on streaming. There's a whole different requirement when you do vinyl or something like that. But why is it so important? So that's question number 1. Okay, so let's look at some of our tools here in Logic. And I need to switch this to stereo. Okay, cool. So in terms of mastering, there's really a few different tasks that are super important. And they fall into different categories, and it depends on your project. So if you're doing an EP, mini album, or a full-length album, then mastering has more to do with what you're doing than, say, you're just releasing a single. A single, you can worry about making sure that it sounds as good as any other single in that genre that gets released. It's approximately the same loudness. It has approximately the same expectations in terms of spectrum, that it has the right amount of high frequencies, middle frequencies, low frequencies, that it has a nice clean beginning to the song and a clean ending to the song, but it's encapsulated in itself. So release a single, just have to worry about the song. Release a compilation, not even a compilation, but just a collection of songs. Then you have to worry about each song individually, but also how they fit together. So you need to make sure that the ordering is right. A lot of times the ordering will be determined by other people than the mastering engineer, but there may be some good feedback from a mastering engineer saying, whoa, it's like normally I would have, a fast song and then a slow song and a fast song. I mean, they could give you some feedback on ordering, because if you're like, ooh, I want 2 fast songs and then 3 slow songs, it's like maybe you need to think about the pacing of it. But that doesn't always happen from the mastering engineer, but certainly they could weigh in if they're noticing that there's some flow between the songs that isn't working. But then that's the flow. It's like, say we have a fast song, like a really up-tempo banger, and it comes to the end of the song, and it's like it ends, the file ends, and then like right after that, a slow song starts, and it's like a change in mood. That's whiplash, right? And so you've gone from this aesthetic, which is really up-tempo, to something that's down-tempo. One of the things you can do is help with the pacing of this, so that from that really up-tempo thing to this really big change, that there's more space. So it actually breathes a little bit. And that could be if we know that the song is going to be part of this either EP or album, then you can add some space at the end of the one song before the slow song starts, or once the slow song starts. You don't want to really do too much of a delay going into the next song. You want people, when they go to the song, to know that it started and that they don't think something's broken or their headphones are disconnected. You don't want to throw anybody off and think that their equipment is faulty, but you do want to make sure that there's that space if you know what song is going from which one to the next. On top of that, you want to make sure that level-wise, they're not adjusting their volume knob between your songs and your project. So they go from a loud one, even if they go to a soft one next, you want to make sure that the levels are good so that they hear that and they just listen. They never have to go over and turn up their headphones or turn up their stereo or adjust their car. It's like you want to make sure that it flows all the way through in terms of levels. And then on top of that, you want to make sure everything sounds like it's cohesive. Everything belongs in the same project, so that it sounds like one artist made it and not necessarily a bunch of different artists. And if you are doing a compilation with a bunch of different artists, we still might do this to make it sound like they all sound like a cohesive unit. So how do we do all of these things? I think you probably can understand the concepts of what I just said. How do we actually do them and make this work? It's a great question. I think I'm going to pull open on my other screen here. Let me find an export. I didn't actually pull anything directly yet. So let's do this. A batch 89. Okay, this one's not done. That's an MP3. I don't want that anyway. Inside the Sun. I got one. Let me just make sure I have the latest version. April 20th. Okay, there we go. Versioning, right? So this is something I would never do on a mastering thing. It looks like the sample rate of the file is different than the project, but since I'm streaming, I have to do this. I have to convert the file. I never would convert a file like this when I'm doing the mastering. But like I said, I need it to be a certain sample rate for the live stream. Let's hear what this sounds like at the beginning. And I don't know. Let me listen. I'd like to see inside the sun. Okay, so that's a song that's really close to being done with the mix. But let's actually look at some of our metering tools. So these are the tools that are going to help us. These are like our stethoscope and, the little thing we look in people's mouths if we're doctors kind of thing. This is our set of tools that are going to help us. And we do have some functional ones inside Logic, I would say. There are certainly some other tools out there which you can get third-party tools that are really featured or focused on mastering, and that's great. But we have this thing called the multimeter here, and this tells us a lot about what our levels are at. I've always thought that would be fun. So right off the bat, we have this LUFS. You'll recognize that from a minute ago on that blog where it said minus 14 for Spotify, minus 15 for Apple Music, everything, or 16 for Apple Music, and minus 15 for one other service. So I'm going to actually set this little bar right here to minus 14 because that'll always tell me when it's going above it.
Disintegrate me instantly, and as I melt I would be free. I live inside a hurricane, it's whirlwinds inside my brain.
So my LUFSs are above that. They're definitely hitting above there a little bit. Is this so much that that's going to break the streaming service? Well, no. They're going to take it and they're going to work with it, but they're going to be changing the sound if I'm too far away. The further away it gets from it, the more it's going to do stuff on the streaming services. They're not going to return it to me. They're not going to say, wow, that is unacceptable. They're going to say, oh, okay. And then you'll listen to it and you may or may not notice it sounds different, but it'll be a little bit different. So this has an analyzer in terms of all of our frequencies.
It calls to me relentlessly, and when I blow away I'm free. Hold me close, don't touch me. Hold my hand.
So this is showing us all the different frequencies, and it's useful if I'm looking and wondering why it sounds funny in the low frequencies or something. But it does give us a picture of what our harmonic content is. If we were to see that it was like really just, pushed up loud in the low frequencies, especially down in these ones that are single digits. In the class, we learned about sound and the length of waveforms. And part of learning about the physical wavelengths of sound teaches us a number of things. One of them is if you have a low frequency sound around 60 hertz, we're talking, it's a very long wavelength, right? It takes a long time for that to develop in space. Well, if something, say it takes 8 feet to develop in the air as a waveform, what does that mean? This will be question number 2 for my students in your homework. What does that mean in terms of the likelihood of mastering on headphones being a good idea? Now, headphones, we're talking like an inch. You know what I mean? If you count your ear cavity, maybe an inch and a half or 2 inches, right? How do waveforms that are super low develop inside your headphones, right? This is a topic for a different class in terms of acoustics. But what does what you know about sound and the wavelengths of sound indicate to you about the efficiency or the effectiveness of mastering using headphones, which I'm wearing right now? That's question number 2. Respond to that. I think I'll be interested to hear what some of your thoughts are. I'm not going to give you the answer right now, other than to say common sense might suggest something. Okay, so we have this tool. We also have this other meter, which shows us the difference between the left and the right headphones in this case. Everything that's in the middle is mono. Everything that goes along this line is in the left speaker. Everything on that line is the right speaker. So we're going to get spaghetti, right? Because there's a lot of stuff happening in all of the panning options.
Turn away. Don't look at me. I'll hide inside. Listen to the words I'll never say.
So it's not like a super extreme stereo image. I'm keeping it pretty centered with the mix. And I believe this stream is in stereo. For those of you who are listening, really quickly, just tell me if all you're hearing is in the left speaker or left headphone right now. So if you're listening in the chat, tell me if this is just in the left. I want to make sure we're getting a stereo stream. So in the chat, please let me know if that was just on the left side or if we have anything switched for the stream. So let me know in the chat, please. Please, please, please. There's at least 4 or 5 of you watching right now. So somebody's going to do this, I can tell. Ooh, a couple more people joined right after I said that. Okay, I'm just going to let one of you. Left only. Okay, great. Thanks, Samuel. Oh, and Roger. Perfect. So another thing about mastering then, and this is still important, but it's in addition to what I've already said, but we have this, the meter up. I'm going to pull out on this channel a gain plugin, but it also, the gain plugin has this thing called phase invert. And so I can invert my phase, and you'll hear something very different now. Not very, the music will be the same, but it could sound quite different.
Focus deep, can't quit to see.
So if we flip the phase of either the left or right channel, instead of things working together as they're designed in this mix, boosting up when they're the same frequency in the same place, if you flip the phase, sometimes they can actually start to cancel itself out. So if you have a mix that has having issues with this, and I'll show you inside my metering tools. It's on the other meter that's there, but I'm going to do a bigger one of it, this right here. So this is a correlation meter, and that means the left and right channels, it's going to tell us if they're interacting in a positive way or if they're canceling some things out. So right now,
All you want me to be. Why are you mad? I've done my best.
so when I flip that phase, you'll see it goes from a positive interaction to a negative one. Most of the time this is okay. It really, people can do creative things with their mixes and have things that interact that way. The problem is if those left and right channels get combined together. So I'm going to add another one of these gain things at the end of this. So this is the first one. This is the second one. Here's the correlation meter, right? Let me move these over so you can actually not have me blocking them. So on the first one,
It'll never rest. I live inside a hurricane.
when I monosum them, that means the left and the right get mixed together and we just have one channel. And this was like the iPhone until just a couple years ago, right? The iPhones for a long time had mono speakers. If you ever played a speaker out of it, it would be a sum. I'm sure there's some other phones out there that are still like this if you play on the speaker, but there potentially could be, a TV setting where you have it set to mono, or it's possible. You could have an old car stereo. I mean, there's a lot of things that could create this even still today. So we have to worry about this. Let me show you then the original, but I'm going to phase invert the right. You'll see that the correlation is in the negative, and then I'm going to monosum it.
It calls to me.
So we need to, at some point, have somebody tracking our mix to make sure that the correlation between the various channels is positive and not negative. So this is another job. Typically should happen at the mix no matter what, but often should at least be double checked at the mastering phase. Okay, so we're checking that. Let's do some level adjustments. and talk about that so we can maybe get this locked down closer to that minus 14 LUFS. I'm going to use a couple tools, a little bit in our mixing video that I did for this class. We talked about some dynamics. I believe there's still some more coming up in this class about this, but we're going to use a tool called a limiter. And this limiter is like a ceiling. It's like the sound, once we set this, the sound can't go above that ceiling. And so we're going to set the ceiling to a certain place, and we're going to adjust it to match what we have in our multimeter here. So that way we can get the levels right. Now, this is one aspect of this. We may want to look at some equalization, which we've looked at in this class, to talk about how to make it the frequency response better as well. But that's we'll get there in a second. So right now, I'm going to adjust the output level and the gain, and I'm going to be looking at the LUFSs over here, which I have set.
Away, I'm free. Hold me close, but don't touch me. Hold my hands, I'll turn away. Don't look at me, I'll hide inside. Listen to the words I'll never say. Now I know that this was what was supposed to be. Find my way to you to set me free. This was always going to be the one and all.
So this is a facetious type example because I would never do it quite like this, where I gain the limiter up by 20 and then pull it down by 6. Yes, I was getting it really close to the line, but at the cost of it sounding good. And so we have to always think about, what exactly are we looking for? This is the weakness of a tool like Logic. Meaning, sure, I have an LUFS meter, and I've got this tool that controls my dynamics. But why can't I just have a tool that says, I want you to take the output of this and make it minus 14 LUFS with a true peak of, minus 0.1? Why can't we just have a tool that does this? Well, there are tools that do that. It's just not in every workstation. And so if you're doing a lot of mastering, then you want to have the tools that do this right. Something from Isotope or, something else out there that can really be the right tool, the right place. But we can do it in here. We just have to more use these to get it in the right place, but also, use our ears, which I'm on headphones because of the stream, and not on a pair of really nice speakers, which would be better. So compromising at every corner, using tools that aren't exactly right, but we can get it close. And I've done mixes that I was really happy with how they sounded out on the streaming platforms. And so I'm not as worried about it, but it's a compromise. And so using a tool that's not the exact right tool is always going to be a compromise. Let's adjust this a little differently so I can maybe be happy with the sound as well.
Only God, you were always going to be my last. Now I know that this was what was supposed to be. Find my way to you to set me free. This was always going to be the one and only. Listen to the words I'll never say.
So a limiter then becomes only half of that. If I really want to change the dynamic range or the difference between the loudness and the soft spots, a limiter isn't really going to do as much with that. So what I want to do potentially here is add another tool called a compressor right before it, and maybe even out some of those things, keeping that limiter in place that I had, but adjusting it once I get some of this in a better location. We're going to use the most transparent of these.
Now I know that this was what was supposed to be. Find my way to you to set me free. This was always going to be the one and only path. You were always going to be my last. Now I know that this was what was supposed to be. Find my way to you to set me free. This was always going to be the one and my brain. It calls to me relentlessly. And when I blow away, I'm free. Hold me close, don't touch me. Hold my hand, I'll turn away. Don't look at me, I'll hide inside. Listen to the words I'll never say.
Yeah, not too happy exactly, but it's getting a lot closer. And we're getting the LUFS around the right place. The true peak is a little bit low, but I definitely think we're getting there. Now, if I'm not able to get exactly where I want, and it's like I'm just really fighting things, then part of that could be the low frequency content of the track. Maybe the bass isn't really well mixed. And so I can go back to the original and adjust some of those things throughout the actual mix to make it better to where it is. Let's look at a little bit of the equalization or the spectrum. And we have this thing in Logic called a linear phase EQ. It's a little bit more transparent. It's less prone to changing the character of your sound and more just making nice, clean changes, which for mastering makes a lot of sense. So we can actually push this a little bit, get the spectrum just right. But we're going to look at this plus another tool in just a moment. So what are we listening for? Well, there's a couple things when you're doing equalization, and they almost always require you to have some sort of reference track. Now, a good mastering engineer is going to have reference tracks no matter what, but they're also, and this is where the part of mastering comes in from being an expert, they're going to have this built-in reference track called years of experience, right? They're going to know what sounds good and bad, but they're still going to have reference tracks, and they're going to listen to what other people have released, and they're going to do comparative analysis. Well, we also have a couple really nice tools to help us with that. So I'm going to come in here with my equalization and do this thing called match EQ. And I'm going to have it learn the spectrum of my song.
Hold me close, don't touch me. Hold my hand, I'll turn away. Don't look at me, I'll hide it.
So I'm going to turn off learn. So over that amount of time, this is the curve of my song. You'll actually see there's a little bit of a difference between the left and right channels, which I think is expected anytime you have stuff happening, but I don't know if it's too much or too little. That'd be another thing to look at. Now for the reference, we're going to load a reference from an audio file. And I'm going to pull this over to the side. This is one thing where I can't stream this part of this because of copyright. I can't just play other people's music, right? So let me find. No, not there. I'm looking for one of my professionally released non-my music things. I gotta find it real quick. Ha ha ha. I don't know what that is. We're gonna just do that one. Okay. Open. That looks like it's wrong. I can already tell. Let's see. One other example here. Where are you? Okay, music. So the idea is you bring in a song from some other artist and analyzing it. That can't be right either. But that is a song. That looks totally. Oof. We're going to try one other one. I wish. So this is the part I wish I could actually hear what I was doing and play what other songs I want because. Okay, I got an idea. We're going to do this one. Oh, that's an MP3. Anyway, some issues. Let me show you what it does. I'm not going to play this because it's more in concept at this moment. But you do the reference, you do your current one, and you say match. And then this gives us a curve that changes our original to sound or have a similar overall frequency of the other one. So say there's a song in your genre that you really like, and they're considered like an amazing band. You could do this to get an idea of how close you are. Like I said, I don't think this is going to be the right match.
It calls to me relentlessly, and when I blow away, I'm free. Hold me close, don't touch me. Hold my hand, turn away. Don't look at me, I'll hide inside.
Interesting. It's a great way to know how close you are with your mix. So if you're mixing and you put this match EQ on your main track or on your, the output of your project, and you use a reference that sounds a certain way, you learn your current, you load the reference, and then you do the match, you're going to see just how close you are with your spectrum, which can be very useful in order to know that. Okay, so this would be question number 3 for my students. How important is it to have your project sound like other projects in the same genre that have been professionally released? How important is that? I'll let you think about that. I don't know if there's any real right or wrong answers to these questions, but I'm hoping that they'll get you thinking about what happens. In terms of the mastering then, the last thing we're going to be doing is making sure that we have the right beginning and end in terms of sound. This song right here, you'll hear when I push play at the very beginning. There's like a little vocoder thing, which I like. But I might just put a teeny fade in at the very, very beginning to make sure that there's no chance for any clicks or pops. And then at the end, it looks like in the mix, I've already faded out. Now, I did that in the mix project. If I was matching this song with other songs, maybe I'd want to change it. So if I knew that I was mastering multiple songs together, I might take off that fade out of the actual project and just let it go out and end, and then start or redo the fade out when I have the next song in place. So I know exactly how it's going to work together. If this is just going to be a song that gets one off uploaded onto Spotify, then great. Who cares? I can let that fade out happen however it makes the most sense. I can do it in the mix or here. It doesn't matter as much where it happens. It still probably should happen, but I can do it in either place. It's when I need to do this song to the next song to the next song that I want to be able to adjust them while I'm actually hearing all the songs next to each other. So we can change some spectrum. We can do the match EQ, which takes one sonic imprint off of one song and helps us put it on the other song. We use compression and limiting to get the levels to the right place. We're matching the specs of the streaming services to their, LUFS and the true peak amounts. We do a little bit of fade in, fade out, make sure that those are working. If at any point there are things in the song where we're like, dang, it's like this doesn't sound great. No matter what I'm trying here, it doesn't sound great. Then you need to have a conversation with the mix engineer or the person mixing it and say, you know what? It's like the vocals are always too loud. It's like I can't hear the other instruments. In the mastering, you can't change the levels of things, and so you need to go back to the mix. And so a mastering engineer is often going to talk to the mix engineer or the client and say, you know what, this is great. It's like your song sounds amazing, but here's a couple things that I'm asking you to go back and change so that I can do my job properly as the mastering engineer. Turn down your snare drum. Your kick drum is so soft that I can barely hear it, but in the style of music, it should be really loud and thumping. So you could go back and forth because some things happen better in the mix. Some things can be fixed in the master, but it's a communication. It's a back and forth that has to happen. Once you're done with all of this, we export the file, and a lot of this is going to depend on where you're putting it next. If you're going to vinyl, there's places that do vinyl pressing, and they have the preparation phase there. Things are very specific in mastering for vinyl because it's a physical thing, and there's the groove that the needle goes down. And if you put a lot of bass frequencies on one side of left or right, then it can actually pop out your needle or just cause other issues. And so there's actual requirements of the medium that are important. And so we have to focus on those. In terms of digital streaming, great. We just look up the latest specs and make sure we're in alignment. If you're still going to a CD format, then we still do CD pressings. So companies still make CDs that you sell. It's still out there as an option. It's certainly less than it used to be, but even something like Logic, you can burn it to a CD directly from this, but you can't put in track markers. And so you have to use some other software to make a multi-track CD. I can put one song on a CD using this. And my computer doesn't even have a CD burner. I have to hook up one. So it is possible. It's not bad to test it out, but nowadays I just hook up my phone, export to my phone, listen to it in the car using Bluetooth, or on headphones or wherever. And then I take it, and if it's, fully finished and I have all the information, there's one other piece of mastering, which is all the data that goes with it, the metadata, which I'm not going to talk about in this video, but there are more things when you upload it into like a distribution service like DistroKid. that you need information about who wrote it and what the name is and all of the other information. And so there are more things that happen, and those sometimes happen in partnership with the mastering engineer, but sometimes they just go back to the production team. Okay. Hope this was useful look into mastering by a professed non-mastering engineer, but someone who understands and has taught this. But if a project that I was working on had a budget, would always go to a mastering engineer. That's just the truth of it all. Is that if there's a money for it, then we're going to do it, because I really have a lot of respect for mastering engineers and the tools they use and the ears they have and the experience that they come with. I think it's so valuable to be able to rely on that instead of having to consistently learn and hone those skills myself, because I'm not going to. It's just not part of my day-to-day in and outs. Okay. That's it for this. Don't forget, if you're one of the students in my class, there were 3 questions put throughout this video. Those are the 3 you're going to submit as part of the module this week online. And that's it. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching.